Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between. My name is Maple, and you are coming to watch the Academy League Season 12 draft. Joining me today, an odd fellow. How are you, pal? There are tons of really good players on the board, and I see that the countdown has started for picks, but we already have like tons of great players. Foof is on here, Meep is on here, Rogers, Sad Boy. There are some really good top level players that are available, and we have 32 picks times 3. So we're going to see 96 picks over about the next hour and a half or so. Wow. Yes, it is. Look at the Wolves picking Foof, and this is not a huge surprise that Foof is going to go first. Fits in really well with the Wolves mantra. They care a lot about culture, and so they are absolutely solid. Good pick. And next up after this is going to be the Blizzard with the second pick, and then we'll have a couple of retentions, which I'll mention shortly.
Yeah. Yeah, and it looks like we are going to have the pick in already for the Blizzards as well.
Yeah, they're just going to do that confirmation step, and then after that's done, we'll be able to talk a little bit more about it. But yeah, Foof is an absolute solid pick for the Wolves. I'm pretty impressed, and indeed, as we say that, the pick is in, and this pick is somebody who's very close to my heart, someone who I miss greatly, and I'm glad to see back, Helly.
Yeah, and, Helly is looking like a really great player statistics-wise, within the top 100 in a lot of the categories in doubles. Definitely seems like a much more solid doubles player than anything else. But one of the big things is that he is 41st in shots per game, so he definitely puts a lot of shots on goal, very offensive-minded player.
Absolutely. And Helly is also a really solid player and a really solid person. I'll mention real quick the 2 retentions that we have as we're waiting for the next pick to come in. The third pick, Spectre, are retaining Darth Otter. He's an 11-5 that's going to stay on that team. And then the fourth pick is going to be the demo keeping DK. And fun fact, a lot of people think that DK stands for Demo King because he is an absolute insane demo player, or player that demos, sorry. But he is also, that is actually not what DK stands for. I'll let him tell you someday if he wants to do that himself.
Yeah, and DK is actually a player that I'm actually familiar with from the last time I was in MLE. He used to play with my brother Gigabyte a lot, and he's definitely an extremely solid player. Definitely earned that title of Demo King. And especially in ACAD, that aggression is something that doesn't get talked about enough. But it does look like we are going to have our 5th pick in, and it's going to be Mello.
Absolutely solid pickup. Melo's a 12 salary player that seems to play mostly 2s. And when I say that, 113 games in 2s and 8 in 3s. So I think we won't even look at the 3 stats, but 17th overall in shots per game at an average of 4.85. That's pretty high when you've got over 200 players in ACAP.
Yeah, and with having between doubles and standard and all that kind of thing this season, it's something really nice to have. But you still see a lot of these players falling back on that 2s, and having high shots in 2s is something that's so critical because 2s is kind of like an extended 1s, right? Like you still need to have a decent amount of individual play, and you're basically just having a second player to support you for when you miss.
It's true. A lot of people will tell you that when you're playing 2s, it's basically 1s with a partner. That's kind of the saying that I've heard all sorts of times. But you know what? We'll have to stop that there because the next pick is already in. The Flames are going to take Binky Boppin.
And Binky is a 12.0 player, prefers 2s, and I love this stat line. He is second in the stat rankings for assists in 2s.
Absolutely. And he really is. Binky definitely knows what he's doing. I know that there's another pick coming in. 7th overall, though, will be a retention. Mr. Biggles will be staying on the Aviators.
Yeah, and Biggles is a great player, always has been. He's another player that I recognize. Definitely going to be a great retention there for the Aviators.
Nice, good pickup or good retention, I guess. Would have picked him up a different season. I definitely saw that coming. I mean, you want to retain a player like Mr. Biggles. Yeah, so now the Comets are on the clock with the 8th pick, and we're motoring through these pretty quickly, bud.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of how these are going in ACAT. A lot of players try out a lot. There's a lot of players in there. And as I'm speaking, we have our next pick ready to go.
Yep. And then 8th pick overall is going to be No Wreck. And No Wreck is a player that hasn't played a ton of scrims, have played only 22 games overall, majority of them being 3v3. But this is crazy. Has an 81.25% win rate in threes. That is crazy.
Yeah, and looking at his 3 stat lines, he's not doing anything crazy himself. And so having that high win percentage tells me that he's a really solid team player in threes.
Yep. Absolutely. And then we have 2 retentions. The first one for the Dodgers is Ondo. Love this guy. He's a League Ops Council member. Very close to my heart, the fact that I'm a League Ops coordinator. I have an immense amount of respect for Ondo. Really excited to see that he's staying with his friends on the Dodgers. And the Pandas will be retaining Matthews 175.
Both of those players, not really names that I'm personally familiar with, but the big thing with these retentions are you get to keep that experience from the previous season coming into the next season. And if you're drafting players who are newer to the league, it's always great to have those veteran players on to kind of help them figure themselves out, especially if it's their first time being in a league at all, which is really common in MLE.
I absolutely totally agree with you. The next pick already, we've headed into the 11th pick. And this is going to be Trailblazer, spelled more like a jacket as opposed to somebody who's blazing a trail.
Yeah, seeing those names is always really interesting. He's got 13 wins in his 2s games, 65% win percentage. So definitely an extremely solid player, having 20 goals per game. So I think he's definitely going to be someone to look out for this season.
All right, and with that, we're going to head over to the Spartans. Pick 12, that pick is in, and that is going to be Anjay21. And Anjay has quite a few games played, sitting in at about 43 games overall. Has played most of them in 2s and already has close to a 70% win rate there and 87.5% win rate in 3s. So really good pickup here. And you were talking about stat lines earlier, has the 8th highest assist per game at 1.26 and has the number 1 highest MBPR in ACAT in 2s at a 7.04. That is insanely high for an ACAT.
Yeah, Anjay is such a great pickup for the Spartans. B++, definitely right on top of things. I love seeing the picks that he makes. He always has just the most insane players just come out of absolutely nowhere. But as we're talking about that, the 13th pick is going to be in as well, and it's going to be LeVar Ball.
Yeah, you mentioned LeVar Ball earlier, so I'm actually really excited to see this. LeVar Ball is probably a player that although has a little bit of room left because they're a 12 salary, could potentially rank out into CL this season, but definitely a good pick. Play a couple of, maybe sit for a couple of weeks, play on the team, and then maybe move up, provide some good leadership. Definitely has a lot of skill, so no surprise here that LeVar Ball went in the top 20. I'm a little surprised not in the top 10, in fact.
Yeah, and one of the biggest stats, he's only got 4 games in 3s, but he hasn't lost a game. In these scrims, even going 4 games without losing is a pretty big deal. So he definitely, I think, is going to be an extremely solid player for the Eclipse.
Absolutely. The next pick then belongs to B++ and the Spartans, and that is going to be the Southpaw Ryan.
Yeah, and Southpaw Ryan, I think, is going to be a player that I think pairs very well with Anjay. He is 8th in assists for 3v3. He has a very good stat line for 2s as well, and I think that this is going to be a very interesting duo with Anjay.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Actually, it's interesting to see these 2 picks so nice and close together. I know there was some good trades that were done this season, and very excited to see how they perform together, because you're right, great stat lines, so it'll be interesting to see. But next we have the Shadow, who are going to be coming up, and indeed that pick is in, and the Shadow are going to be taking Clay HD.
Yeah, and Clay HD is an extremely solid player. You know, he's 9th overall in saves for 2v2, and saves is a stat line that I don't think gets talked about enough because if you're that player that's back and can consistently keep shots from going on goal, I think you're almost more valuable in some cases than a solid striker.
Yep, absolutely, totally agree. And actually, Clay HD is also a former council member, so somebody who's very well known in MLE and who knows MLE very well themselves. So that's awesome to see Clay HD get drafted and in the top 16. So the next pick that we're going to see is going to be from the Lightning. Sorry, their name is so dark in the Discord sometimes it's hard to read. It's going to be from the Lightning. And that pick is in, and this is a guy I've played with a ton. He's absolutely a phenomenal ones player and twos. Mock HD, congratulations, Mock, getting picked in the first half of the first round of the AL draft.
Yeah, and this is a name that I know chat's going to be very excited with. I saw them going kind of crazy right as we started, you know, spamming his name everywhere. An extremely solid player, has played a ton of games, and with all those games is still in very high stat lines all over the board with 2s and 3s. And so I think this is going to be an extremely solid pick for the Lightning.
Yeah, I agree. I think Mock has done a really good job. He's been very active in scrims and definitely has some good skill. Has certainly styled on me more than once. But moving right along, we'll talk about the Foxes. Pick 17, sorry. And the Foxes are going to take Ryo. And I like to bring up Ryu, because he used to be the GM of the Jets before Ripper took over last season. So he's fairly well known around the league, and actually Ryo also used to be a production coordinator, so well known around our parts as well by most of the production team. So congratulations, Ryo, on getting picked. Definitely a solid pickup here.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and he's got a 44% win percentage in his scrims, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you've played 59 scrims, you know, that those start to add up. And he's still going to be an extremely solid player. You know, 1.5 goals per game. If you're scoring an average of 1 goal per game, that means you're almost going to be guaranteed to get at least one. And if you're getting 1 goal and your teammate or your opponents are not getting any, then you know how that math adds up.
Absolutely. All right, so what we have then is a retention. That'll be the 18th pick. The Rhinos are going to keep Carl. And then after that, we have the pick for the Sharks, and that is going to be McQuail.
Yeah, and I'm trying to track his name down here on the stat sheet just a little bit, just so I can talk about him. There he is. So he again is another player with extremely high games played, and with that, you know, is still 73rd with shots with a 1.66, or excuse me, saves with a 1.66 save percentage. And so I again think that he's going to be an extremely solid player this season. Great pickup for the Sharks.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Has been super busy with scrims. 143, 3,175 games played so far in scrims, and sitting in 73rd overall with saves per game at 1.66 in twos, and then 73rd also overall at 1.03 in threes. So really good stat line, and like to see it.
Yeah, and especially coming out of an 11 salary, you know, like I don't think that we talk about the fact that these 11 styles are like they're the core of this academy league. Really, they're the players that are going to last for a little while, but they still have a high enough skill level to have massive success.
Awesome. All right, well, we're going to move on to the next pick. The Knights, with their 20th pick overall, are going to go ahead and pick DT Amaze.
Yeah, and DT Amaze coming in as a 12 sal, has a 77% win percentage in twos and a 75 win percentage in threes. Those are insane stat lines, especially compared with 6th overall in goals in twos and 9th overall with MVPR in threes. Like he's just all over the board.
Yeah, DT is certainly everywhere, like you said. They have some skill. I mean, even shots per game are 29th in threes and 42nd in twos. That's lots. When you're peppering the net or you're getting close to the net, you're also creating opportunities. If you're missing, maybe hitting crossbars or whatever, you're creating lots of opportunities for your teammates to finish. And so, you know, with assists, maybe a little bit less, but still in threes, sitting at 7th overall in assists per game. So you mentioned that stat earlier. Good pickup there. DT Amaze looks like they're a good support player for their team.
Yeah, I love seeing high assists. But with that, we're going to move right along to the 21st pick. The Hurricanes are going to take Link's Ray.
Yeah, I think that's, or Lin X-Ray or Lynx Ray. I think you're right. I'm sorry for butchering the name. I apologize profusely. But Lynx Ray is a 12 salary player that has played quite a few scrims and has over 100 games in, is 57% win rate in twos and a 50% win rate in threes. Definitely has mained twos, 108 games there versus 8 and threes. Good pickup. Looks like they're going to be a really solid addition to the Hurricanes, who know very well how to pick winning and championship teams.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, Hurricanes have a long history of success in MLE, and this winning percentage being above 50% with over 100 games played is just such a crazy stat line. Because when you're playing that many games, winning that often means that you are just going to be an extremely solid player for your team this season. And I think the Hurricanes really nailed this one.
I could not agree more. Looks like the next pick is going to be coming in here shortly, and this is going to be the Jets that have this pick. It'll be their first pick because they did make the playoffs. They were not allowed to go, or they were not put into the draft lottery, which I've really enjoyed casting alongside Leachy. So interested to see who this pick is going to be and how it's going to go. And it looks like that pick is in fact, and this is going to be a fellow that I've chatted with quite a bit. He's Brazilian. His name is Liso.
Yeah, and Liso looking like an extremely solid player on the stat line. You know, he's got 71st in shots in twos. He's 74th in saves in threes. So definitely splitting his time between the two game modes, although definitely preferring twos with 42 overall games played. But definitely looks like a really solid player and just a great pickup by the Jets.
Yeah, I agree with you and your analysis there. The other thing that the Jets have is culture is very important in their franchise. I was an AGM for the Jets last year at the start for the first half of the season. Lisa will fit in very well amongst that group, which is awesome for him. But you know what? With that said, already time to move on. It looks like the Bulls have picked DJ, not the DJ that is the coordinator, the DJ that doesn't have the AY at the end of his name.
Yeah, and you know, DJ coming into this as looking like a really solid player. I don't have a ton of this overall DJ information. Oh, sorry. Sorry, did I hit the wrong button? I hit the wrong button. Yeah, I was going to say, DJ coming in as a PS4 player. I always like to see the console players, but he is a 12.5 salary. So it's a little bit of a risky pick, in my opinion, because he does have that risk of ranking out. But, you know, when a high-ranked player is there, you just got to take him.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I actually think this is a good pickup, and it helps them get started. But we've already got the next pick, the 24th pick overall in the AL draft. Going to the Elite is going to be Primed.
Yeah, and Primed has shown, you know, not the greatest stat line that we've seen, but he still has that, or excuse me, they still have that 42% win percentage. You know, they still have a 4 MVPR, 1.48 goals per game. So looking like an extremely solid player, especially for an 11 salary.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the stat line either. If we look at their threes and we focus on that more than the twos, they're sitting at 74th in assists per game, 81st in goals per game. So they're still sitting kind of in the top 40th or top 40% of AL. I think those are respectable stats, especially for an 11. Definitely some good learning to come out of this one, and definitely a good pick. But next we're gonna head over to the Wizards, and Jamesy has picked. Let's see if I can pronounce this. I think it's just Far.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
FAHHR.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's Far as well. Far is a player that I'm familiar with from other leagues. Definitely an extremely solid Xbox player. You know, people rip on console players all the time, but I mean, you got to look at the stat lines here. He's got they have 53% win percentage in twos, 75 in threes, and they're 12th and 14th in MVPR and goals per game in twos. So just an extremely solid overall player. Absolutely fantastic pickup by the Wizards.
Yeah, I think this is maybe even a little bit of a sleeper pick for the Wizards. So good pickup here, really good stat line. But already it's time to move on to the Sharks. And Hobo has picked Miss Ginge.
Yeah, and that's just a fantastic name just in general.
Yeah, love it.
But this is another player who's just such a great support player. You know, of all the stats that they have in twos, they are 54th in saves, averaging almost 2 saves per game over the course of 43 games. So just going to be an extremely solid defensive player for the Sharks. And I think this is going to be a great pick.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, actually. The stat line is excellent. The saves per game is huge at 54th. You can't ask for a lot better than that. Like, to see somebody in that top, like, 15, 20% is really good. But before I keep going, it's already time to talk about the Wizards' second pick in the first round, and they are picking Trouble.
Yeah, and Trouble. This is the great thing about having picks so close together. You immediately get to pick somebody to pair great with Far. Trouble is going to be second overall in threes, even though they only played a couple of games, but 24th overall in saves in twos. Once again, we see that high saves percentage, and I think a defensive player like Trouble is going to pair extremely well with a pick like Far. Wizards going absolutely crazy here at the tail end of round one.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with your analysis here. Looking at Trouble's stats, I know there's not a huge amount to take from when they played threes. It's only been 4 games, but second overall in saves per game at 2. I know that's not a ton, but that's okay. Still 100% win rate there in threes. But we already have our next pick. The Bears have picked Dietrich.
Yeah, and Dietrich is coming in here as an 11 Sal. Definitely has not played as many scrims as we've seen everybody else play, but still has a 41% win percentage in threes, a little bit lower in twos, but they're still in that 36th percentile for saves. So we're seeing another defensive player coming off the board here for the Bears, and I think that they're kind of showing they might be leaning a little more towards defensive play style this season.
And I don't think there's a problem with that. I think there's a saying that defense wins championships. We see that in football. We see that in hockey and all sorts of different games. Let's go hockey. But anyways, moving on. We have our next pick from the Outlaws. Stobads' pick, Silent Wolf. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was going to say Silent Wolf is coming in with a preference to both twos and threes, but definitely played more twos, playing 62 games and still being above 50 games played with an above 50% win percentage. I think is something that we definitely need to look at.
Yeah, I absolutely think that too. If you have a look and see, I mean, yeah, Dietrich is definitely a player that, or sorry, Silent Wolf, I apologize, is definitely a player that is a good pickup here. But already we're going to head over to the next pick. The 30th pick overall is going to go to the Demolition, and this is going to be Hammy.
Yeah, and DJ always has really great picks for this demo squad, and I think Hammy is going to go right along well with everything else that DJ is trying to do here. Hammy having a 63% win percentage in twos and a 58% win percentage in threes. This is an extremely solid player, being in the top 10 in MVPR and goals in threes. So I think this is just an insane pick from DJ.
Yeah, I agree. I think DJ's got himself a bit of a sleeper here that maybe some other people missed. Hammy at a 12.5 salary and a win percentage like this does risk potentially ranking up here sooner than later. However, some of these stat lines are great. Shots per goal in threes being the 14th highest in the league. MVPR being a 3.93. That's 7th highest in the league amongst AL players in threes. That's pretty incredible. That's a pretty awesome stat line. So good pickup by DJ here. I think the demo are building a solid team that isn't necessarily focused on being flashy. It's focused on being competent and focused on understanding how to play the game. And this stat line helps tell that story.
Yeah, and at the Diamond to Champ level that you see a lot of these ACAD players playing at, that's exactly what you need to see. But we are going to have our 31st pick, in for the Tyrants, and that is going to be Game Strike 208.
It is, and Game Strike 208 doesn't have a ton of scrims in, about 20 games so far, 55% win average, so no issues with that. Goals per game is 43rd highest, and saves per game is 23rd highest in all of AL in twos, so that's really good. And then just moving on quickly, before we get to the next pick, the Puffins do have a retention, and that's going to be their FM Cloud Fuel, who also happens to be our newest marketing board member. So there you go, Cloud Fuel. You kept yourself. That's a pretty good sign.
Yeah, and you gotta love seeing the season 11 champions retaining a player already. Gonna have coming off that winning season. You're gonna be able to set the tone very early, I think, if they can get some good players around them.
Yep. Absolutely. So everybody have a look at this draft board. This is the first round draft completed for ACAD. Have a look. Get that into your memories, burn it in there, because pretty shortly we're going to you're going to be forced to listen to just the two of us. The draft board is gone, magically disappeared. Sleegy's working his awesome magic in the background. We're going to clear that draft board and get ready for round 2.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing from round 1 is the Wizards, I think, did a fantastic job getting some sleeper picks in Far and Trouble. But I think the biggest pick from that entire round might have been Hammy going as late as they did, pick 30 to the demolition. I think Hammy could have gone a lot earlier.
Yeah, actually, I'm a little surprised by that. I agree with you. I think Hammy definitely was a bit of a sleeper pick, and I also agree with you that that the Wizards really set themselves up here, and to see Far in trouble, even down a little bit further, isn't necessarily super surprising. But I think they're going to work well together. And you noted that in looking at their stat line, that one is a bit more offensive, one is a bit more defensive, and so when they can put that together, that's a dangerous combination. You know, you've got everything you need, and then when you can add a third player to that, look out, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think B++ was kind of doing the same thing with the Spartans as well, getting that big pick in Anjay first, and then a couple picks later grabbing Southpaw Ryan, who, again, we're seeing that kind of dynamic of picking players who are very well offensive and then immediately pairing them with a defensive player, so you're not just getting two, ball-chasing players right off the bat. And I think that the GMs in this draft did a fantastic job already piecing some pieces together for the puzzle going long-term for this season.
Absolutely. All right, and as everybody can see, we now have round 2, and it is the blank board, and we are going to be waiting for the next pick to come in. So while we wait for that, yeah, I think your observations are fantastic. There's a couple of teams that really have some standout picks here. I still want to point out that the Eclipse have LeVar Ball. I think LeVar Ball is a really good player, and I'm interested to see how the rest of the team gets built around. Can't forget Foof being picked first overall and Helly as well. But I got to already move on. First pick of the second round in the AL Season 12 draft is in, and that will be Mike Raffone.
First off, that is one of the greatest names that I have seen in an extremely long time. So kudos to the Wolves just for that. But the Wolves always are out here picking great players, and especially with a 12 salary, who has a 60% win percentage in twos. I think Mike is going to be a fantastic player for the Wolves this season.
Yeah, I agree with you. Not only that 60% win rate puts Mike at 62nd out of about 240 players, so that's pretty astounding. But you know what? We're going to move on because the Blizzard have picked their second pick in the second round. 34th overall will be Acoustic Crunch.
And that's another great name. I'm loving this. But here's a big thing with Acoustic Crunch. Acoustic Crunch is 13th overall in shots per game in twos with 4.96. That's a lot of shots in a game. And so definitely a very big offensive player coming out of Acoustic for the Blizzards. And so again, we're seeing this first pick of the draft for a lot of these teams first couple picks of the draft being an extremely offensive player. And so it'll be interesting to see who the Blizzard pairs Acoustic with going forward.
That's right, and I think that'll pair well with Helly because we had Helly that they picked in the first round. Now we're in the second round, so I do think that Acoustic is a solid pick. That MVPR is an average of 5.1. That is huge. But we're going to move on. Spectre have the third pick in the draft, and the Spectre are going to take Lion Lord.
Yeah, and Lion Lord is another solid player. We're seeing a lot of 12 salaries starting to go now, but Lion Lord has an 83% win percentage in twos. 83. That's fourth out of what you said, like 240 players or 204 players, and 32nd in shots per game, 51st in saves. This definitely is a player that I'm surprised to see going in round 2.
Yeah, I think this player probably should have gone a little bit earlier, so another good sleeper pick, but that's okay. With the fourth pick in the second draft for the ACAD, we've got the Hawks, and they are taking Appa.
Yeah, and Appa is an extremely solid player. Looking at their stat line, looks like they performed just a little bit better in threes than twos, even though they played roughly the same amount of games in each. But getting a 75% win percentage in threes over 24 games, that's pretty crazy.
That is pretty crazy, actually. And to sit like 4 shots per game is massive for any league. And to be able to do that, 3.75 in threes, 4 in twos, that just says that you're an offensive-minded player and you like to get those goals. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about the fifth pick. It's going to be coming in from the Express. Solid pick. I know this player. It is Panda.
Yeah, and Pander's, like you said, an extremely solid 11.5 pick. Terminator always has this great mind when he's picking his players, and he definitely seems like he's found another diamond in the rough here. Again, we're seeing these high win percentage, mid to high win percentage, and very decently offensive-minded players. I think this was a great pick by Terminator.
I absolutely agree with you there, and Term knows what he's doing. He's not only good with draft pick trading and stuff like that, but he's a very astute GM. And Kopech's definitely trusts him. So that's good. And the next pick we're going to have, we're just waiting for the thumbs up, is going to be the 38th pick overall to the Hive, and it's going to be Rogers.
Yep, and we're going to see another 12.5 sal off the board now. That's cutting the 12.5 sals down pretty deep. But we're seeing another 66% win percentage here in twos, 50% in threes. So we're starting to see a lot of these high win percentages. And this is another defensive-minded player. Rogers having a 1.7 saves per game, 7th in the league in threes. So just, again, another great defensive mind here for the Hive.
Yep, absolutely agree with you. It's a solid pickup. The Hive have done well, and this just says that Paulie is paying really close attention and doing a good job in tryouts. Our next pick is actually going to be a retention, and that is going to be to the Aviators. That'll be Darth Red Raider, and then after that, we're actually going to get our 40th pick, which is going to be from the. Oops, sorry, we're going to hold off for a second here. I think that the 40th pick overall is going to belong to the Comets. We'll just wait for that thumbs up. So 39th pick is actually the Aviators. That'll be Darth Red Raider. And then the 40th pick will be going to the Comets, and that's the one that we're just... Sorry.
Yeah, hey, we're doing it live, people. This is what happens sometimes.
No worries. That's how it goes. That's okay. That's what we're doing, and we appreciate everybody tuning in and watching. It's very exciting. I'm telling you, I'm so excited and absolutely hyped for today, and absolutely pumped. As soon as I'm done here with AL, I'm going to go and I'm going to help out with LO, and then I'm going to go hang out with the Sabres after that. All right. So as we've got it here, and you can see that pick for the Comets is going to be X Tarasenko 91X. So I think obviously a Tarasenko fan in the NHL. Let's go Chell, baby.
Yeah, absolutely. And being a 12 sal and another PS4 player, these win percentages are absolutely insane. Tarasenko is 79% win percentage in twos, within the top 20 of shots, assists, goals, and MVPR. How did Tarasenko fall into the second round?
That's some excellent drafting and discovery, I guess, by Stoofy and the fellows at the Comets. We're going to look at the two retentions real quick that we've got before we move forward. So we have Smalls, which you can see on your screen, being retained by the Dodgers, and then it will be Killer Baird that is being retained by the Pandas. Really two good retentions, and we're already going to move over to the 43rd pick overall in the AL draft for season 12, and that is going to belong to the Hive. That is going to be Laney.
Yeah, and I think Laney's going to be another solid player here to pair with Rogers. I think Paulie's doing a really great job with his late round picks here. We've got another 11.5 sal coming off the board, prefers twos, but we're seeing 4 shots per game again. And I think that Paulie is really trying to put together a very offensive-minded team here, and I think that's really going to work out for them this season.
Yeah, I think Paulie knows what he's doing. I could tell that from just the way he's drafting and the players that he's picking. This player, although only has a 46% MVP, 46% win rate in twos, that's only over a smaller sample size and only 39 games, but definitely has some solid numbers, 65th overall in goals per game, so definitely does a good job. But next, we're going to go see the Spartans. We're going to go look at what B++ has been able to pull off here. And he's picking up a player called Obsidian Bear.
Yeah, and Obsidian Bear is going to be a player that prefers threes, 12 sal, but in preferring threes, they've got a 60% win percentage, 2.7 MVPR, 2 shots per game, essentially a goal for every shot. So another extremely solid player to pair with Anjay and Southpaw Ryan.
Yeah, I think that this player is good. There's definitely less risk of this player ranking out, which is what you want. And because they prefer threes, and they've definitely done a really good job in threes, I think they pair very well, or not pair, sorry. They fit very well with the other two. I think it's a solid 3 pick. So, but we're already going to go to the next pick. We get only a couple seconds to talk. We're going to go to the Eclipse, who have picked up Caligo.
Yeah, and C Squared always has some interesting picks here coming in. You know, I love seeing the players that the Eclipse pick. I've never played on the Eclipse, but I tend to like their picks pretty regularly. 16th in MVPR with a 5.29 MVPR. Again, this is another player that, just looking at this stat line, I'm amazed that these players are falling as far as they are.
Yeah, I am too, actually. Now, 27 games played is a bit of a smaller look. And you know what? They might have been wanting to play on this team, so they didn't really attend a whole lot of tryouts and things like that. And that's kind of how sometimes players can fall. But when you've got 16th in MVPR, 24th in goals, 46th in assists across all of ACAD and 2s, that really tells you a big story here. And that is, I think, that Caligo, I said Caligo earlier, Caligo has really gone far down. But the Express have their next pick up. That'll be 14th overall in the second round for the AL. And that is going to be Folly Try 789.
And this player is definitely an extremely solid twos player, has a preference to twos, 42 games played, has 4.7 shots per game. Hitting almost 5 shots per game in twos is insane. And I think Terminator's found another diamond in the rough here in the second round. I don't know how he's finding these players this late.
I don't know. You know what? Term knows what he's doing, and I don't think he's willing to share his methods. This is part of what makes him successful. So good work by Term on this one. I agree. This is a diamond in the rough, and these are some pretty outstanding stats, and only at a 12, meaning there's definitely some room for development and rank out. But that said, we're going to go to the 15th pick, belonging to the Shadow. I guess it's the 47th overall, and it's going to be to, oh gosh, Chickson. I hope I said that right.
Yeah, I was gonna say Chickson was gonna be my assumption there. This is another player that, although they prefer threes, played a lot more twos games. It might have just been that's what was available, but still an extremely solid player. 50% win percentage in both twos and threes. 74th overall in saves, averaging 1 save per game. And again, another 12 stout coming off. So, like you said, having that room to improve, not as much worry about ranking out. I think this is going to be a very solid pick here for the Shadow.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think the Shadow are setting themselves up to have a good team that can be competitive and definitely put up some really good stats. So excited to see how the rest of the draft plays out and the rest of the season as well. But with that said, we're going to move on to the 48th pick overall, which belongs to the Knights, and this is going to be Sir Hold Space.
Yeah, and I think this is an interesting pick here by the Knights. This player only has 12 games played in twos, none in threes, but is all right with both playlists. Still though, averaging 1.8 saves per game. I think this is a player that they must have had their eye on pretty early because, like I said, not a lot of stats to show here.
No, and that's okay. You know what? Sometimes players play their scrims, they get eligible, that's what they want to do, but they go to tryouts and they attend those. And I think that's probably what's happened here is the Knights have found a player that they really like. But we're going to move on. We're going to go to the Foxes, the 49th pick overall, and moving on to the second half of the second round in AL will be YU Akau.
And once again, fantastic name choice here. The Fox is hitting it out of the park with these players. But this is another player, 100 total games played, 60 in twos, 40 in threes. Another player with over 50% win percentage within the top 100 in pretty much every stat category. This is an extremely solid 12 salary picking up this late in the game.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't have any concerns with this pick. I think it's a smart pick, decent player, good saves per game, like you said, good pick overall. We're gonna move on here. The Rhinos have a retention of Mr. C. That will be in the 50th slot, and then moving on to the 51st pick is a player that I know extremely well. I'm gonna wait just for confirmation, but this is a player I know extremely well, and I am very happy. And as somebody has said quietly in my ear, this is the legend himself. Soviet Shark is going to be picked up to the Sharks.
Well, this just seems like it was kind of legally required for Soviet Shark to go to the Sharks. But I think that they're going to be an extremely solid pick to pair with Miss Ginge, who we talked about earlier was a pretty defensive-minded player. And Soviet Shark is second overall in assists, so another team player, but definitely a little bit more in terms of pushing the offense. And so I think that the Sharks are putting together a really solid squad here already.
Yeah, they really are. And I mean, I know Soviet really well. So Soviet is the lead of the development team. He's the coordinator for the dev team. He's responsible largely, he and Riz are largely responsible for the original development of the bot and bringing on other team members to get scrims working, to get the bot converted, to move us away from spreadsheets and into other forms like website, which is being developed and whatnot. Soviet is a tremendous guy. He's become a good friend. I trust him very much, and I just enjoy spending lots of time with him. He fits very well within Audie's culture and Audie and Hobo's culture that they've established. So I think not only will the Sharks have a great pickup, but I know that Soviet will be very excited to join the Sharks franchise as well. So good fit, good pairing.
Yeah, and those relationships are exactly why I'm kind of leaning on you a little bit on this one. Great analysis there. And it does look like we are going to have our 52nd pick in here by the Ducks. And this is a player that I'm actually familiar with outside of MLE. I still don't know how to pronounce his name. I believe he goes by Silent. But he's an extremely solid 12.5 salary player. Like I said, I've played with him in other leagues. His stat lines are extremely good in twos within the 50th percentile. He is definitely a team player, communicates very well, and so I think this is an extremely solid pickup here by the Ducks.
Yeah, I agree. Silent 7 has scrimmed a ton, 123 scrims overall, 65% win rate in twos. You can't beat it. You can't get a lot better than that. But we're going to move on to the Hurricanes' 53rd pick overall in the draft and 21st for this round, and this will be silver.
Yeah, this is another really good pick here late in the draft. An 11.5 salary going, and within the top 100 percentile in a lot of the categories here. Has played a decent amount of games in both twos and threes, still maintaining that over 50% win percentage. And I think the Hurricanes are definitely piecing together something special here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they are too. And you know what? What I'm noticing here is the saves per game with Silver. You're getting 36th overall in saves per games in twos, and then 74th overall saves per games in threes. That's a player that you want. You want someone who can be on the back line, and I think that's what they got here for sure.
Yeah, I think that having that, that solid third player, solid second player is something that gets glossed over a lot at every level. But we are going to move on to our 54th pick by the Jets. And this is another fantastic name. The Jets are going to select the Dom Diggity.
The Dom Diggity. I love it. What a great name. Now, Dom doesn't have a ton of games played. He's got 35 overall, or they have 35 overall, sorry. 40% win rate in twos. Seems to play a little bit more threes at a 55% win rate. Good pickup for the Jets here. Notice the shots on goal in twos are 8th overall in all of AL at a 5.2. That's significant. Like, that is just peppering them with shots, and that is what you need. Yeah, I think this is a good pick.
Yeah, and on that note, only having 15 games played in twos, still over the course of 15 games, maintaining a 5-shot average is huge. And so I think having this very offensive-minded player, and once again, we're seeing these drafts going so well for all these teams, picking offensive-minded and defensive-minded just all over the place. And I think this is a very solid offensive pick for the Jets.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's what the Jets like to do is they've already got some players there in AL, so they're adding and complementing what they've already got. Being very familiar with these guys, I could tell you that is probably what they're doing, is trying to load up a little bit on offense. They tend to be a very offensive-minded team, so this is a great pick for them. Next, we're going to move on to the 55th pick overall. From the Bulls, we're going to see Zeeks.
Yeah, and Zeeks is another 12 sal coming in here. I think this was actually a really good pick by Atomic. 58% win percentage in twos, averaging roughly an assist per game. Even when you're a little under one with the 0.83 assists, you're still seeing that this player has that mentality of, okay, I need to pass the ball, I need to work with my teammates here, and I think that's exactly what you want to see out of this Bulls pick.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think this is a good mid-range pick. I think they're definitely more of a twos player than a threes player, and we kind of see that from the stats. So, yeah, no issues with this pickup at all. So we are going to be moving on to the 56th pick overall. Just waiting for a little bit of confirmation here. This pick will go to the Elite, to the newest franchise manager that we have in MLE, and this will be Ray Finkel. And it looks like that pick is coming up, and that pick is going to be Axe Pancake.
Yeah, and I think this is a really solid pick for this being Ray Finkel's first draft. Being an 11.5 salary player means that this player has a lot of room to develop, prefers twos, and definitely shows that with 48 games played, but still maintaining another 54% win percentage, which once again is showing me this is an extremely solid team player, and their communication is probably extremely good.
Yeah, I do know pancake a little bit. Nothing goes better with maple syrup than some pancakes, and me being maple. But Axe and I have chatted before. Definitely knows what he's doing. Definitely a great guy and a good player. So not only is Ray going to get a good player, he's also going to get a great personality on his team, and I think that's really important. You don't just want. Now, listen, people and players in MLE are fantastic. And I truly believe that. I believe that the vast, vast, vast majority of players here are excellent. Some people just kind of have an extra something where they're extra friendly and extra nice and extra warm and welcoming, and Axe is one of those guys. So really looking forward to Ray having him on the team. I think he's going to be a good fit for the Elite.
Yeah, and I think having a personality like that is what contributes to having high win percentage, even when you don't have a ton of amazing stats yourself. This player is only sitting at like 113th, 100th, 165th in most of their categories, but still having that high win percentage. And I think that has a lot to do with, like you said, about that personality and just being that great team player. And sometimes that's exactly what a team needs. They just need someone to just kind of be that rock and be that good personality to keep everyone going.
Absolutely agree with that. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that having a player, on your team, especially being a new franchise manager, you want to have some good chemistry gelling. And I think Axe will help do that, because when you win, you play for each other instead of just for yourself. And that really is what's going to win championships. But moving on forward, we have the Jets, who with the 57th pick overall have picked Lieutenant Dan.
Lieutenant Dan's got no legs, but this Lieutenant Dan has a lot of legs. Good Lord, look at these stats.
This is unreal.
Lieutenant Dan is a 10.5 salary. I think this is the first 10.5 we've seen go off the board, but they're sitting at a 6 MVPR, 2.5 goals per game, 1.2 assists per game. I think the only reason Lieutenant Dan slipped as far as they did has to be because they're a 10.5 sal. I mean, the Jets keeping in line with this offensive mentality that we were talking about with their last pick. This is such an incredible pick this late in the draft.
You know what? And you pointed out all the offensive stats. We're talking top 10 players in MVPR, goals per game, assists per game, but also still rated 89th in saves per game in twos and 12th in threes. So still a good all-around player. This is actually a really solid pickup. Good job by the Jets here. But we're going to move on to the Ducks' 58th pick overall. Schwartzy has elected to pick MLE.
Yes, and this is another player who, 11.5 salary, lots of room to grow and improve. Big threes player, and showing it with these stat lines, 1 goal per game, half an assist per game, 1.2 saves, almost 3 shots in threes. I think this is going to be an extremely good chemistry player, looking kind of like a flex player. Can be offensive, but also sit back and play defensive. So my statistical opinion here is telling me that MLE probably has extremely good rotations for an 11.5.
Yeah, you're probably right, but we're going to move on to the Sabres before we can talk about that. 59th pick overall, the Sabres are picking my boy, Jabronis. And I'm going to tell you something. A lot of people have mispronounced his name. I want to correct it. I asked him what it is. It is Jabronis, not Gabronis, even though it's not spelled with a J. This guy is awesome. What a great attitude. I'm so excited to have him on the team, but man, can he play. And you know what? Seeing him play, seeing the skill that he's got, seeing the talent that he's got on the field, this is a really solid pick for the Sabres, and I'm excited to have him on the team.
Yeah, and once again, that 12 salary, meaning that he has room to improve, but just like that, we are moving right along to the 60th pick with the Bears, and this is going to be Merc for hire.
Yeah, Merc for Hire is a great guy. He's played 44 scrim games because my math is really good in my head. He's a 10-5 player. He came to a couple of tryouts that we did, and honestly, he was on my board. I like Merc a lot. Again, good attitude, but his stats don't necessarily show all the tangibles that he brings to the team, and it doesn't always show the whole picture. He's not done super well in twos. Definitely is more of a threes player. And looking at these stats, he's in the top 50 in just about everything: MVPR, goals, assists, and saves. That's awesome, and that's what you want to see. You want to see a player like that at a 10-5 that's already having that kind of an impact in threes. Just wait until he gets with a team, gets playing normally and regularly. What kind of absolute amazing play we're going to see out of Merc. So really, really, really solid pickup for the Bears here. Good job, Zach.
Yeah, and that's something I was going to point out was being a 10-5, I'm almost not even as worried about the stats with them being this good because this player has so much room to grow and improve, especially being on this team early. But as much as I'd like to talk about that, we are moving right along to the next Outlaws pick, which is going to be the 61st pick, and it is going to be Mr. Beaker.
Yeah, so Mr. Beaker is an 11 salary player that has 118 games played. So tons of information here, although 110 are twos and only 8 are threes. So looking at the twos, sitting at a 49.1% win average, so about a 50-50. MVPR of 4.03, which is actually really good, but saves per game at 1.77 puts him in 40th out of 240 players roughly in AL. So when you can sit and play 40th after playing 110 scrims in saves per game, this is a really good defensive player. This is an excellent pickup by Stove and the Outlaws.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm having some trouble recalling their first pick, but I'm sure that the defensive pick pairs extremely well with that first one. But we are moving right along to the 62nd pick from the Hawks, and Stas is going to be picking Hidden Shadow.
Yeah, Hidden Shadow is solid as well. Has 32 scrims played, so not a ton, but enough. But here's the stats, and this is what blows my mind. Win percentage in twos, 71.4%. Win percentage in threes, 90.9%. So just huge. 4th overall in MVPR in threes, 4th overall in goals per game in threes, 27th overall in shots and goals in threes. And the stat line on twos is not quite as high, sitting 63rd in goals, sitting 93rd in MVPR, so still sitting well above the average, but phenomenal player here. Like, this is actually a really solid 10-5 pickup. Really good job here by Stas.
Yeah, this is exactly what you want to see in a 10-5, but our next pick is already in. Jamesy was super quick with this one. 63rd pick going to the Wizards. This is going to be Super Hot Boy.
Super Hot Boy! All right, yeah, we've got 39 games played. It's a 10-5 salary, so we're starting to get a little bit deeper in the draft, and we're starting to find players getting drafted that teams want to build on. So this is going to be the final pick. Sorry, this will be the final pick for the second round, and yeah, Super Hot Boy looks like they're going to be pretty good. I'm going to assume, with the name that it's a he, but maybe I shouldn't. 74th overall in shots per game, and he's got 2.25 saves per game, and 86th overall in shots per game in threes. It's a pretty solid pickup here. And then our final pickup is actually our 64th overall is going to be a retention from the Puffins, and that is going to be Mouse Rat.
Yeah, not surprising there to see the Puffins retaining 2 of their championship team from last season. So I think that third pick is going to be where we see how they pair that together. But I love seeing these 10.5s coming off the board, especially with these high stat lines. And even when they don't have high stat lines like Super Hot Boy does, there's so much room to grow and improve as a 10.5 salary because they're going to be there for a while. You can groom these players to play for you for a couple seasons and potentially get some really good performance out of them going forward.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, right? So everybody have a good look at the draft board here that you see. You've got your second round picks in the Academy League draft for season 12 here at Minor League Esports. You got some excellent players getting picked here, some real sleeper picks here. I think we identified a few as we were talking, really solid picks. So I think shortly here, we're going to lose the draft board. As we say that, there it happens. And Sleegy's going to go ahead and do his magic that he does in the background that keeps this production running smoothly. And we'll sit and chat a little bit about some of what we saw. So what do you think? What did you see that surprised you or that you really liked?
So I think the Jets won round 2, 100%. Getting Lieutenant Dan as probably the best 10.5 in the draft, pairing him with Dom Diggity. I think the Jets are definitely looking at this draft and being, okay, hey, everybody, watch out. We're going to throw the ball at you until you stop it, and you may not even be able to do that. So I think the Jets definitely won the second round, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah, I can see how you say that. I have a bias here. I'm a Sabre now. That's awesome for me. I definitely think Jabronis is actually a bit of a sleeper pick, and I think you're going to see that throughout the season. It's going to pair really well with the players that we already have in AL, and so I'm really excited to see that. So what you see here is you can see the what you can see here is you can see the third round draft board that will be put up here soon. And we're already waiting for approval to talk to you about the 65th pick overall.
Yep, it does look like that 65th
I apologize.
Yep.
I'm talking too much. That's the problem here. So the 65th pick overall will belong to the Wolves, and it will be Faster Than Falcon.
Yep, and this is another player who I'm familiar with. Falcon is a great player. I've played with them in a couple different leagues. A really solid 11 and a half sal, 54 games played, 58 total played, 54 in twos, and being within the top 40th in a lot of their stat lines, almost 5 shots per game again, almost a save every game, 2 goals. This is such a solid player to pick at this point in the draft.
This is actually a little bit of a sleeper pick. I'm going to call that right now because I think that Ray has done an absolutely solid job in picking, and this is another really good pick. That's a lot of really good support and attack player. This is a good all-around player. So well done, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next. And that is going to be the Blizzard. And that pick is in, and that is going to be Peso. And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. I was just going to say this is another player who's only got about 18 games played. So being an 11 and a half sal definitely looks like it was a player that just got their eligibility in and then just started doing a bunch of tryouts. And I think Blizzard really nailed one here with another good team player. Almost an assist per game, pretty good stats and everything else. 50% win percentage. I think this is going to be a really solid late draft pick.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you right now, Peso for me is a steal. He was definitely a player that we were looking at and watching for, and I was hoping would fall a little bit so that we could grab him. This guy's a twos main. He does have some ability in playing threes, don't get me wrong, but when he sets up and starts playing twos, he's unreal. So good pickup here. A little disappointed that he didn't fall a bit further, but that's okay. We're going to move on to the next pick. The Spectres have picked Dre.
Yeah, this is going to be another really solid late round pick. 11 and a half sal, had played 153 games total. So just so many games played, maintaining roughly a 50% win percentage across the board, and just such a great stat line for that many games played.
Yeah, no surprise here that Dre goes. His stat line doesn't show his actual skill, which is pretty crazy. In watching some games that he's played in, some of the tryouts and stuff like that, Dre has some unreal mechanics, and looking forward to seeing how he does and plays. But we're going to move forward right to the 4th pick of the 3rd round of the AL draft, and the Hawks have selected Manifest.
Yeah, and this is another player who not a ton of games played, only 23 total games played across twos and threes, definitely had a preference towards twos. So again, another tryout player, and I think Stoss really nailed one here with a really good stat line, especially in threes, and Manifest just looks like a really good all-around player.
Yep, I actually do agree with you. I don't have any issues with this pick at all. I think Manifest, I agree. I think he's going to be, it looks towards being a threes main despite having played more twos games. But I'll be interested to see how Manifest goes and continues on. So we're just waiting for the next pick, which is going to belong to the Tyrants. And I believe that's in. We're just waiting for confirmation. And this is going to be the 69th overall pick.
Nice.
And
I have zero interest in trying to pronounce this name. My God. So the Tyrants are going to pick Jesse 5A5 Hall 5.
Jesse it is.
And this is Jesse looks like an extremely solid 11 and a half player this late in the game. Only 13 total games played. So once again, got their eligibility and started going to tryouts. But still maintaining 5 MVPR in twos and 2.4 in threes. And again, looking like an extremely solid team player here coming off the board.
Yep, I absolutely agree with that. I don't think that there's any issues with this pick at all. In fact, I think that Jesse, I'd love if I could pronounce the name. I feel a little bit bad that I can't. Definitely prefers twos, and the stats show that. But you know what? We're going to move right on. The Aviators have the 70th overall pick, and with that, they are picking Hyperion.
Yeah, and again, we're seeing roughly 20 games played, but in those 18 of those were in twos, and being 17th in saves with 1.89. So a very good defensive pick here by Grant for the Aviators, and I think this is going to be a really good player for them to kind of base their defense around.
Yeah, I think you're right, and in fact, we're going to have another pick from Grant. The Aviators were able to trade and have 2 back-to-back picks, and so it'll be interesting to see who they pair Hyperion with, because I think Hyperion looks to me to be a little bit more of a defensive player, getting closer to 1.9 saves per game. And here we have the pick, and it is going to be Noro.
Yeah, and with Noro, I'm going to be looking to see some more offensive minded stats here. I'm not completely familiar with the player myself. I'm trying to see if we can get some of the stat lines figured out. Doesn't look like there's much, so I don't really know what I can say about this player, to be honest.
Congratulations to the Aviators for picking Noro.
Yeah, that's it. There's the commentary.
But yeah, sorry. So if we, we're doing what we can. No, I think that's good for the Aviators. Grant and Broski definitely have a good grasp on what they're doing. They've been working closely together. Broski being a new FM in the league, and Grant's been around for a while. He's one of the casters here. That does MLE games and whatnot. He's got a lot of experience, and I think because of that, he's seen a lot of players, and he's been able to see what makes players good and gel together. So I'm sure that that pick with that pair with Hyperion and Noro will definitely be a good, solid pairing together.
Yeah, and for lack of stats, I'm sure that Noro probably, in my opinion, with the defensive pick first, is probably going to be a little bit more offensive-minded. And having 2 picks back-to-back is such a great thing, being able to pick a second player immediately. But our 72nd pick is in, and that's going to be the Comets taking Ivante.
Yeah, I think this is actually a really good pick. These stats are pretty unreal. So Ivante only has 6 games played. My guess is that Ivante has probably just come in, got eligible, and then went to tryouts. We've seen a bunch of players like that. Stats are a little bit tough to see because there's so few scrims in, but we're seeing 9th in goals per game, 10th in assists per game, 20th in shots per game, 27th in win percentage. We're seeing some really, really solid stats here. Yeah, I think it's a good pick, potentially a sleeper pick too.
Yeah, and I think players like this are exactly why we don't really need to worry about stats too much, because when you go into those tryouts, you get to hear a player's communication. You get to see how the player plays with a bunch of different people at one time, and you can really make sure that they're exactly the player you want, stats to the side. And I think that this is going to probably be a very solid pick here from Stoofy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And Stoofy knows what he's doing. He's been around the league for a little while. But you know what? That said, let's move on to the next pick. The Lightning have the 73rd pick overall, and they're going to pick, AATXE.
Yeah,
I'm not quite
sure.
Is it Addy or Atzi? Maybe. I'm sorry. I apologize for butchering your name. Yes, good job by the Lightning for this pickup. This player has lots of games played, has about 128 games played, so lots of information to grab on. Sitting about 60th percentile for win ratio, is a PS4 player, 11.5 salary. And sitting in and around middle of the league, maybe between 40th and 50th percentile for all of their stats. But their win percentage is actually sitting at 66, so that's actually really solid.
Yeah, and I think that with over 100 games played, maintaining that over 50% win percentage is so critical, especially for an 11-5, because it shows how good of an overall player you are and that you can still win games despite playing a lot. But we are going to be moving on to the 74th pick of the draft, and with that, the Pandas are going to be taking Anubis.
Yeah, I think this is a good pick. So Anubis has only played 20 games, so not a lot, definitely enough to get eligible, and then a little bit more on top of that. That's pretty close to what it takes to become eligible. But what we see here is we've got 44th overall in saves per game. So here's a defensive player that they've grabbed that will hopefully be able to help them out and allow their more offensive players to go out and strike.
Yeah, and Anubis is a player that I'm familiar with outside of MLE. Extremely solid player for their rank. And, the stats show everything. Very defensive-minded player. He's going to be a very good, two or three man for this Panda squad. And I think this was a very solid pick here by Leko.
Awesome. Yeah, Leko definitely knows what he's doing. But with that, we're going to move on to the 75th overall pick for the Flames, and this is going to be Aspects.
Yeah, and Aspects is a player that I am extremely familiar with. I played with him on my UR team last season. We made the playoffs. Communicates extremely well. Very good team player if you can pair him with the right kind of also offensive-minded player. But he will need to also play with someone who can play decent defense. It's not that his defense is bad. It's just he's so offensive-minded. He just wants to be attacking the ball at all times, setting his teammates up for passes. So I think Aspects is an extremely solid pick here.
Right on. Next on, we're going to move on to the 76th overall pick. The Pirates own it, and it is going to be it will be Tez.
Yeah, and we're seeing another player here, only 10 games played, but, 75% win percentage in threes, which is listed as their preference, and pretty decent stat lines here. But once again, probably showed more in tryouts than in scrims. I'm going to have to assume, decent communication, all the intangibles that you can't see out of the stat line. So probably a pretty solid pick here by the Pirates.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I don't have any concerns at all with Tez. Although we're only seeing a small window, like only 10 games, that's okay, and that's just fine. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to the 77th pick overall belonging to the Eclipse. It's going to be MCAS 86.
Yeah, I think C Squared here really nailed it with this late round offensive player. 47th in shots in twos with a 51% win percentage, 66 games played. So just an extremely solid player here. And I love seeing players like this going late in the draft.
Yeah, MCAS is a player that I've had my eye on as well. He's an excellent player, really good stats, probably putting him in the top third of all players. So to see him being drafted closer to the middle means I think we've seen a player fall, and I think this is actually a really smart pickup by the Eclipse. So well done by that team. They did very well.
Yeah, and I think this is going to pair very well with their first pick. So, like you said, extremely solid overall pick, and now we're just waiting on the 78th pick to come in. It's going to be Terminator pulling the trigger on this one, and it's going to be Melon Man.
It is, and Melon Man is somebody who I've also been keeping an eye on. Really good player, definitely plays both. Doesn't have a ton of games played, although over like 57, so that's actually a really good number. But what we're seeing off of this is in threes, all in the top 90. So, and shots per goal in the top 13. So that's really good. When we look at their twos, we're not quite seeing the same numbers, although we are seeing 60th overall in saves per game, 86 overall in assists. I tell you, Melon is an excellent player, and this is a really solid pickup for the Shadow. I apologize, for the Express by Term. So good job here, Term. You definitely, I think this is another player that could have gone earlier. So solid pickup.
Yeah, Melon's another player that I'm familiar with from my own tryouts and from outside of MLE a little bit. Very good on-field communication, and I think is going to be kind of a good cornerstone for this offense that Term's trying to put together.
Awesome. And then we'll move on to the next pick, the Shadow, which I mentioned earlier, so I got a little confused. Have the 79th pick overall, and they are taking TSM.
Definitely seems to be a little bit of a closet TSM fan here, but so many games played, 190 games played, and still maintaining over 50% win percentage in both categories. In fact, 52.63% in both twos and threes. That's consistency.
Yeah, it really is consistency and really good stats otherwise too. A 3 MVPR in threes, which is really hard to do. Usually gets watered out. But we're going to move on to the next pick. The 16th, we're going to hit the midway mark of the third round in AL, and that's going to belong to the demo. That will be Hems.
Yeah, this is a great defensive pick here by DJ, picking up Hems, who's got 27 games played and 1.7 saves per game, 1.04 assists per game. So definitely a very solid 2 or 3 man player who I think is going to be a pretty good baseline for DJ.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm looking here, you and I talked about support players. That was something that both of us really like. Hems has the 25th overall assist per game in all of them. So out of 240, top 10, 12% of players, that's pretty awesome. That's the kind of player I want on my team behind me because I'm not always so very good at being defensive. So yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry. I was just going to say that's something that every team needs. You can pick as many, high MVP players, high shot goal players as you want, but if you don't have a good support player, then your offense is really not going to matter.
All right, well, let's move on to the 81st pick overall, and this is going to start the second half of the third round of the AL draft here for Season 12 in MLE, and it will be America's Finest going to the Foxes.
Yeah, and that's another really solid username. With just over 30 games played, this is another player that played a decent amount of scrims, but not too many. Definitely probably went and did some tryouts, so decent stat lines here. Nothing too crazy, but from an 11 salary, I'm okay with some of these stats because they still have a lot of room to grow.
Yeah, and you know what? You can't get the best players all the time, and there's nothing wrong with the stat line that I'm seeing. In fact, in threes, it's a small look. Only 4 games played in threes. Went 2-2, but still has the number 1 in assists per game at 1.5. So I actually think that this is a good pickup. America's Finest is another player that I had been keeping an eye on and considering or talking to the Sabres about. So. But you know what? We're going to move on. 82nd pick overall belongs to the Rhinos, and Reverse Fridge picks The End of You.
Yeah, this is a great pick here at 12.5 by Reverse Fridge. Reverse Fridge has been around MLE for a while, definitely knows what he's doing. I'm a former Rhinos veteran the last time I played, so I'm really excited to see this pick going. About 100 games played, maintaining over 50% win percentage and everything, but performing very well in pretty much everything. This is actually a really solid 12.5 this late in the draft.
Yeah, I'm actually really surprised. Seeing the stats, I'm seeing 63 games played, and we're seeing 60th place or higher on all stats except for saves. Super offensive, based on stats, super offensive-minded player. Really good, very impressed to see it. That was awesome.
Yeah, and this is something that, like I said, I've played for the Rhinos before. This is something that the organization does. They just kind of snipe these really good players from just who knows where in the draft. And I think this is going to do very well for Reverse Fridge going forward this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And with that, we're going to move on to the 19th pick, or the 83rd overall. And the Lightning are going to pick up Tomez.
Yeah, and Tomez is an 11.5 salary, sitting at 34 games played. Roughly average stat line, other than 75% win percentage in threes, but that's only 4 games played. And this is another player that I think is going to be just a good all-around player. Like you said, you can't get the best players every single time, but sometimes the players who come in with a little bit of a little less than average stat line end up being the ones that shine the most on the field.
Absolutely, they are. And you know what? These are the players that have some room to grow, to get in with a group of people, and then to improve. And I think that's what you're going to see is somebody like Tomez is going to get in, play with the same people, grind it out. And you know what? Could end up putting some big dubs on the board for the Bears. So good pickup here for sure. For the Lightning, good pickup here for Jesus.
Yeah, getting a little ahead of ourselves there. As the 84th pick belongs to the Bears, and that is going to be in. And the Bears are going to take Kalo with the 84th pick.
Yeah, so Kalo only has 12 games played, none in threes, only in twos, although they do say that they're willing to play threes, and is a 10-5 player. In their scrims, went 3-9, so 25% win. You know what? This is a player that we haven't seen a lot of out of scrims, so probably went and impressed in tryouts. Not somebody I'm familiar with, but based on the stat line, again, lots of room for improvement, and can probably join a team and play all sorts of different positions. Maybe a little bit more geared towards defensive play with a bit of a higher saves per game.
Yeah, and being a 10.5 sal, this definitely looks like a developmental player. But our next pick is going to be in. It is going to be the Hurricanes picking at number 85, and they are going to be taking Black Laser off the board.
Yeah, so Black Laser's an Xbox player that prefers twos and is a 10-5 salary. They've definitely played 35 scrims, so I think we have a decent window and picture of what their capacity is, although 27 of those have been played in twos. In twos, has a 70.37 win percent average. This is huge. So good job by Black Laser. I actually think, if I recall right, he's a rank up from FL into AL, so that's actually really good. That also helps understand maybe some of the stats and why they're a bit higher, because I think this is a congregation of all stats. Definitely a good pickup here. I think this is another developmental player that I'm looking forward to seeing.
Yeah, Black Laser looks like the exact kind of player that you want to kind of run through your team for a very long time. But Terminator is going to have his next pick as the 86th pick goes to the Express, and they are going to be taking Looney Tunes.
Nice. I love the name. So Looney Tunes is a PC player. It's an 11.5, and actually, I think this is a bit of a bit of a sleeper pick. So we've got 39, almost 40 games played, 63% win, 63% win percentage in twos and 50% in threes. But sitting 36th overall in saves per game at 1.78. That's awesome. Goals per game 45th at 2. So I think you've really got a good player here that maybe went a little further down than I had expected. I think Looney Tunes, I had them kind of in the 50th to 60th range, not down in the 80s. So good pickup here. I think that was another smart pickup by Term.
Yeah, and you love seeing players that have high goals and high saves, because that means that they're going to be extremely solid on offense and on defense. Probably extremely decent rotations. And this looks like the kind of player that you want to be kind of an on-field leader for your team. So as you said, I think a really solid pick here by Term.
Absolutely agree with you here. And then we're going to move on to the Bulls' 87th pick overall, taking us into the last 10 picks of the AL draft. And this is going to be Gitters.
Yeah, and this is a player who I'm vaguely familiar with. I recognize the name. I think I've seen before, but this is another player who I wouldn't look at the stat line for this player too much in scrims. This player definitely went to tryouts and had some decent intangibles for Atomic, and I think this player is going to pair very well with Atomic's other picks.
Yeah, there's something I know fairly well about Atomic. It's that he's actually pretty astute when it comes to finding good players. He's been around in the league for a little while, in and out and on and off. And as a GM for the Bulls this season, I think he's got a good pick here in Gitters. His stat lines, like you said, aren't the greatest, but he's barely played. And so it's tough to really get a good measure when you only have, maybe 30 or 40 games on somebody. But we're going to go ahead and move forward. The Elite have taken somebody who I'm extremely familiar with. Really happy to see it. Congratulations, Deathman, on being the 88th pick overall. He was a Jet last season.
Yeah, and this is another player with over 120 games played total, 117 in twos. Definitely seems to be the leading there a little bit. Definitely performed a little bit better in threes than in twos, but again, looking like an extremely solid all-around player.
Yeah, Deathman is a really good player. Solid attitude as well. That's something I've known about Deathman for a while. Ran into some issues there towards the end of last season, but is overall a good guy, and I'm excited to see him get drafted, excited to see him go out and play again. I imagine he probably wanted to go back to the Jets, but didn't get that opportunity here this season, so that's okay. I think he's going to do great playing for the Elite.
Yeah, and it does look like we are going to have the 89th pick in by the Sharks, and Hobo is going to be taking Carrazzo here.
Yeah, so I know Carrazzo. He was an FL. We played quite a bit. Carrazzo's a really great guy, really super awesome personality, and I am excited to see this. He's an 11 salary player. He has played 56 games overall. He's only played 4 and 3, so we'll focus on his twos rank his twos play where he's got 52. He's sitting 77th overall in saves per game at 1.62, 75th overall in shots per game at a 4.08. This is a guy that a couple weeks ago was sitting in FL, and he's already moved up to AL, and he's having an impact there. Definitely where he belongs. So good job for Carrazzo. Congratulations, because that is quite impressive for me.
Yeah, and I think this pick pairs very well with the Soviet Shark pick earlier. Two extremely solid players, and I think Carrazzo is going to do, as you said, extremely well for this team, especially as an 11 cell. Definitely has some room to grow there.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. We're going to move on to the 90th pick overall, taking us into the last 7 picks of the draft. The Ducks have decided to take Sauce.
And Sauce is a player that I'm extremely familiar with. I have played with him in another league. I wouldn't worry about his stat line here at all. He only has about 11 games played. He is an exact example of what you want in terms of intangibles. He is an on-field leader. His communication is insane, and he is really going to bring out the best in this Ducks squad. This is a very, very good pick late in the draft.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you bring that experience. It's good to have that. I'm not super familiar with Sauce. I don't know him very well, but definitely looks to be a good player. I mean, the stat line is actually really good, but we're going to go ahead and move on. My boys, the Sabres, 91st overall, have picked a player who I absolutely am dead surprised that he has not gotten taken already, and that is Meep. I'll let you talk about him.
So Meep has really solid stat line here. As you said, extremely surprising that they're going this late. I'm kind of familiar with Meep from previous years. The only thing that I can think of has to be because they're at 12.5 and teams are just starting to get a little scared of that at this point.
Yeah, that might be what it is. I mean, with the win percentage that Meep's got, 75 in twos and 83 in standard 3v3 play, that's pretty high and really good stats. Very offensive-minded player. Will definitely fit in well with the AL squad that we've got already. So, Meep, welcome to the Sabres, pal. All
Yes.
right. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good.
All right, and with that, we're going to move on to the 92nd pick overall. The Knights have selected SDLXM. I'm not even going to try and say it.
Yeah, I mean, SDLXM, that just looks like it is what it is. Extremely solid, 12.5 player, about 20 games played, but 66% win percentage, 8th overall in MVPR with 5, 7th overall with shots with 5. This is another really solid 12.5 that I have to imagine has fallen just because of the salary.
Yeah, I think that must be what it is because these stats are good. You know what? There's not a lot of games, only 22 games played overall. So it's kind of tough to get a good measure. Some of the players that we've seen that have come in that have like 200 or 100 games played plus, we're seeing some of those averages come down a little bit in terms of win percentage. But it's actually really cool to see these stats. I mean, 7th overall in shots per game at 5.22. And I recognize it's only 18 games, but that's hard to do over 18 games. To have 5 shots per game, that's incredible.
Yeah, and especially at this ACAD level, where players are so much better in terms of their defensive rotations as they're starting to kind of figure out how to rotate properly. And so seeing that kind of shot percentage is exactly what you want to see at this level. I think the Knights really hit it out of the park with this one.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't have any issues with this one at all. And I'm kind of curious to see how the next pick's going to go. But... yeah, I don't know. We've had some pretty awesome picks so far. We only have 4 left, and so we'll talk about the 93rd pick overall. To the Outlaws is Corner.
Yeah, and Corner again looks like another good, build around player. 10.5, definitely looks like a developmental player here from Stovads. Decent stats in threes, having only played 4 games, losing 3 of them. But in losing those 3 of them, they had 24th in shots with 3, 53rd in MVPR with just about 3, 22nd with goals with 1.25. So this definitely looks like an extremely solid 10.5 despite the stat line.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the stat line because the 10.5 salary really helps us understand what's going on there. Being a 10.5, you're at the lowest rank possible in your league. You're not expected to outperform everybody, and yet we're seeing that only in that one series that they played, they had excellent shots per game. 3.25 across 4 games is actually difficult to do. It's not that easy for people, at this level, at that level. So, yeah, no, it's definitely good, and I have no issues with it. We're going to talk about our 94th pick overall belonging to the Flames, and they have taken James.
Yeah, and James is going to be, once again, another player that looks like they just kind of got their eligibility out of the way and then went to tryouts. But still, even with that, sitting 73rd with saves, with assists. And I really like seeing that assist number because it shows that the player is not as focused on scoring the ball. They just want to get the ball in the net however it matters, even if that means handing it off to a teammate.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I think that the mark of a good player is that you don't always have to be the one to score. I understand that when you get higher and higher in Rocket League, players start to kind of separate themselves out. So I think that, but at this point, being a defensive player, being an assist and a pass maker is excellent. But let's go ahead and talk about our second last pick. Belongs to the Tyrants, and Taylo has taken a guy that I absolutely love, Rexton.
Yeah, and this stat line is extremely confusing to me just because I don't see how a player like this falls this deep. Rexton has a 71% win percentage over 39 games. They're 11th with goals with 2.5. They're 9th with saves with 2. They have 4.46 shots per game. I don't understand how a player falls like this.
Actually, I'm surprised as well. I actually don't at all understand how it happens either. Not only is Rexton a phenomenal guy and he's a good player, but he's funny and he brings good entertainment value, lots of laughs, and he's very committed to the franchise he's in. Love this pick. I'm really, really excited for Taylor. I think he's going to fit in perfectly with the Tyrants, so that's awesome. And then we're going to talk about our last pick. Sabres traded for this pick. They wanted to get it, and that pick is going to be Grim Nebula.
Yeah, and the last player in the draft is not a title that a lot of people like to have, but that really doesn't mean much. This is actually a really good stat line for this 11.5 player on PC. Maintaining just under a 50% win percentage across 48 games in twos, but I'm really looking at that 1.77 saves per game.
Yeah, absolutely. The 1.77 games saves per game is huge. And when Grim came to tryouts for ACAD, and I was there and I was watching and participating a little bit, we noticed that his defensive ability was great. So really excited to see Grim Nebula joining the team. Man, our AL team this season is going to be cracked, and I think the Sabres are going to be a team to look out for. So good work here. All right, this is going to be everybody's last look at the third round of the ACAD draft. This has been a great draft overall. I think from first, second, and third round, we've seen some really good picks, some sleepers. You mentioned Rexton. I think Meep was also a sleeper pick here, and Tomez as well. There were definitely some good picks here. But all right, I think that takes it for us. Any final words for you before we move forward?
I think we saw some really solid picks here. These ACAD GMs definitely know what they're doing, and I think this ACAD season is going to be extremely exciting to watch.
Awesome. Well, I think you said it well. And with that, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching the Academy League draft for Season 12 of Minor League Esports. For my friend and the man, an odd fellow, I am Maple. Thank you very much for participating and watching, and we will be right back with the Champion League draft.